There is a secret that most pro athletes, elite CEOs, and high performers all know. They all have a group of world-class coaches working for them to help them optimize their potential. At SuperAthlete Radio, our goal is to provide you with the caliber of world-class coaches and guests to help you unlock your potential, dominate your industry, and dominate your life. Let's get better today. And Dr. Ramsey Nijem, super excited to have you on Super Athlete Radio today. How are you?
I'm excellent, man. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat. And it sounds like we were talking beforehand that you're an East Bay guy. You grew up in East Bay, California.
I did, yeah. Spent 18 years of my life in the East Bay and have only moved out of California 4 years ago. So I've grew up my whole life in California, but I miss it dearly, but enjoying Lawrence, Kansas, where I'm currently at.
Yeah, good timing. California's got a little started getting a little weird 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
And then how did you get into the human performance space?
Yeah, I'm the classic strength coach who, wasn't good enough at basketball to make to the NBA, so decided to help athletes, and it just became really just a passion of mine to study and learn and apply, and been doing it now for 14 years.
And how did you start?
So my first kind of real go at the athlete side of things was during my undergrad at UC Santa Barbara, and I was able to land an internship and get hired, and that really, I think, just set the stage for, what my career has become.
And then if I remember correctly, I heard you on a podcast a few years ago that you either worked or interned under Dr. Donald Chu.
Yeah, so I interned at his rehab facility in Castro Valley, California, in the East Bay. That was called Aftercare Rehab at the time, and so yeah, worked. Dr. Donald Chu, he probably doesn't even remember me because it was just a summer internship.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was one of a few people that I have had the pleasure and honor to kind of learn from and work under.
Yeah. So I know Dr. Chu pretty well. After Castro Valley, he moved into a friend of mine's sports performance facility in Dublin.
Yeah, okay.
And then also he's taking a lot of credit for like plyometrics
Mm-hmm.
and bringing that to the United States. And he got a lot of that from like one of my big mentors, Remy Korkemi. I don't know if you ever heard of him when you were in the East Bay.
Mm-mm.
Track speed guy. Yeah. But yeah, Dr. Chu is great.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm not sure what he's doing now. We haven't stayed in touch, but yeah, certainly one of the people that's kind of been part of my journey.
And then how did you so you took your time in aftercare to where?
The aftercare stint was in between basically my undergrad and my master's degree. So I interned at UCSB, and then I became hired on as a part-time performance coach as I was still a student during my senior year. Spent the summer at aftercare. I got the aftercare role because I had interviewed with the Golden State Warriors, and they didn't end up bringing an intern on, but they, wanted to help me out and placed me there at aftercare. And then I went on to get my master's after that at Cal State Fullerton.
And then from there, that's when you ended up with the Sacramento Kings?
Yeah, after my master's, I went back to Santa Barbara to work at Santa Barbara City College, and then I also worked at a place called P3, which is a well-known performance kind of sports science lab in Santa Barbara. Worked there for a year, both of those places, and then I went on to, in 2014, join the Sacramento Kings.
And then what was your biggest takeaway from your time at P3?
My biggest takeaway I think is just ensuring that what we're doing from a testing perspective is influencing our programming and training. That's kind of what they hang their hat on, is the bridge between the testing and the biomechanics, whether it's motion capture or force plates, or other performance testing, and then how that's actually driving the specific training targets for each of your athletes. So, I think they do that at a high level, and that's definitely something that stuck with me.
And in terms, I mean, basketball is such a skill sport, but has there been any specific metric and or weight room movement that has you guys have found has really directly transferred over to
basketball success. This I'll use an example of. I'm friends with a sports scientist by the name of Don Moxley, whose focus was on wrestlers, and he was at Ohio State for a long time. And he realized that once these guys got up to a certain strength in terms of their trap bar, it really just came down to like nothing else really mattered other than cardio. Like the more cardio they had, the more success they had on the wrestling mat. Is there anything that really kind of translates that you've seen in terms in basketball?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I have like hard and fast rules about strength or things like that. I can come up with a few, but counter movement jump and the force plate, kind of those two paired have become the most influential, I think, in what we do, and I think that's shared probably across a lot of NBA teams, or high level basketball teams, because that just guides a lot of our programming and training. Each athlete is going to have things that are unique to them, and as you know, basketball is very much a sport where skill is going to drive performance, and so because of that fine tuning and figuring out what are those different physical needs, I think becomes important. And the force plate, we use that a ton. But I don't have hard and fast rules about, hey, if a guy can he squat 2 times body weight, can he squat 1.5 times body weight, can he trap bar, this load at this speed. We have ideas around those things, but they don't necessarily determine our programs.
Yeah, that big controversy 15 years ago about Kevin Durant not able to bench press the bar really turned into showed how that much impacted his career.
Yeah, exactly.
And then how did you end up with the Kings from P3?
I had another mentor of mine that I worked with at UC Santa Barbara, named Chip Schaefer, and Chip is Phil Jackson's guy, and he knows everyone in the NBA. He's been in the NBA 32 years. This is his 32nd season that the NBA just started, and so he's starting his 32nd season. But
It's
Chip is a
amazing.
mentor of mine, a friend of mine, and a guy that brought me on to the Sacramento Kings after we worked together at UCSB.
And then that's amazing, 32 years. What's the number one thing you feel like you've learned from Chip in the time that you've known him?
I learned a ton from Chip, but I think it's just understanding the game of career. I think that he taught me a lot of things that you have to learn on your own. So an example would be, um, you know, when a team is eating, it's common practice that players are going to eat or at least run through the buffet line before support staff, right? And so like, early on, I popped up, thinking, it was kind of everyone goes, and Chip pulled me aside and said, "Hey, young fella, the way the league works is, this is how it's done." And so he taught me all the little ins and outs of I think just managing yourself as a professional, and I think it's a testament to him that he can be in the NBA for 32 years. Uh, so certainly, um, I think understanding career navigation more so than anything.
And it sounds like you really were able to apply that because he left Sacramento and then you became the coach there and you were a pretty young guy when you became the head there, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I was, 25 and was able to be an assistant for 2 years and learn the ropes and build relationships and, try to impress everybody throughout the organization. And when the time came that Chip moved on to back to the Chicago Bulls, where he's currently at, yeah, they decided to promote me from within. And at 25, I became the head strength and conditioning coach of an NBA team, which is still crazy to think about.
And then you mentioned that basketball is such a skill sport and they play so many games. What do you feel like is kind of the number one role of the strength staff? Or
Yeah, I think it depends, but I think at the end of the day, once an NBA season starts, the number one goal is to keep your players healthy and available. The best ability is availability, so that's I think the number one goal, and then beyond that is the developmental stuff, and making sure that guys are improving some of their performance needs.
and then a lot of these guys are young guys, but how much does now 2023 does nutrition and sleep and all that play a role?
Yeah, I mean, I think it plays a role even more so for the young guys because they don't have habits. They don't know what
Mm.
an 82 season feels like. They've never been through it. Their bodies haven't been through it. There's something called hitting a rookie wall that we talk about a fair amount. And so I think, it's even more so important for the young guys because they don't have the education and experience to handle what they're about to have to handle with 82 games. You look at the current NBA setting with Guys like Chet in OKC, although he's technically a second year guy. He didn't play last year, so this will be his first time trying to get through 82. Wemby, this is his first time, and so yeah, it's important across the board, but I think even more so for those young guys.
And then how do staffs measure and track what players are doing? Do they use HRV? Do you use HRV currently with UK?
No, we don't use HRV, and some teams I think might be doing some HRV stuff with sleep. I'm not really sure what teams are up to nowadays. I know a few years ago it was all the rage, but I think that's fell off a little bit. So I'm not sure what kind of people are doing. But I think a lot of times, a lot of the things that we're looking for with some of our technologies, call it a HRV, you're ultimately just looking for fatigue, and some of that can show up elsewhere, right? Whether it's in your counter movement jumps, whether it's in some subjective wellness scores or surveys, or maybe it's just in understanding and reading body language and having conversations. So the technology is good, and I'm sure certain teams are using certain things, um, but there's also ways around using tech to still get to the ultimate goal of understanding how are athletes responding to the things we're asking them to do.
And then with our audience, who we have many who are kind of obsessed with tech and improvement, and others who kind of look at it in a way of I can tell how my body is feeling. For our audience who is trying to reach high performance, peak performance, how would you say is the best use to utilize technology in your experience?
I think it's just, figuring out what's valuable to you. Don't feel like you have to use things as other people are using them. First and foremost is always understanding the validity and reliability of a technology, of the science that drives that technology. But assuming those things are all in place, it just becomes a question of how is this tech actually helping me change what I'm trying to get to?
Hmm.
There's no
Hmm.
point to wear an Aura ring if you're not going to do anything with the data. Right now, before you even put it on, you probably should understand if it's valid and reliable and those things. But assuming those things are true, which oftentimes they aren't, but if they are true, you still need to do something with that data. Because if you're not, if you get a sleep score every day on your phone, but you don't actually do anything to change your sleep behaviors, well, it doesn't really matter. There's no point to do that. So I think that's the biggest thing. I think in the technology age that we're in, overconsumption of information, obsession with data, people aren't doing anything with the data, and that's important.
And then how long were you with the Kings?
I was with the Kings for 5 years.
And what was your biggest takeaway there?
I mean a ton, with 5 years for sure, a ton. But I think just really, I would say the biggest takeaway is the amount of confidence and understanding of the space, what we're doing. There's if you're gonna train, $1 million athletes essentially every day for 5 years straight, you begin, I think, really hone in on what you think works, what actually matters, um, and how to actually get players to do things. I think, I don't have many superpowers in the space, but one of them is probably getting NBA players or in general getting athletes to do things in the weight room that we want them to do. And so I think that I really have honed in and understand kind of that ability and I think gravitate towards it and accept it. There's certain things that make us good at what we do, and in the NBA for sure, mine was getting players to work out. Players don't have to work out. Oftentimes they're not very motivated to do so. They love basketball, but they don't necessarily love the weight room, and so I think just understanding how to get players to do things and create buy-in and those and build relationships. Those for sure are things that have been impactful and influenced me going forward.
Yeah, God bless. That's not easy. And then what are some of the ways that you are able to do that, that you feel like you've been able to do that?
I think it just comes down to building those relationships early on. I think finding my voice with each player individually. When I talk with players, even still to this day, um, I'm real in tune with trying to understand a feedback loop of this is how I'm talking to them. Are they laughing? Are they smiling? Do they enjoy that conversation? Is the banter there? Is there a rapport being built? Or are they not taking to that? And if they're not, well, next time we come at this player with, conversation, let's try a different approach. And I think really trying to figure out what works with each guy. And then obviously use that and lever that to get them to work out and train. And so I think that that's kind of my approach, generally speaking. And it's the same almost in every relationship I have. It doesn't matter if you're an athlete, a coach, a staff member, a coach that's taking my course, or hopping on a podcast. I think it's always the same thing of understanding how to build a relationship and then lever that relationship to get the ultimate goals of those things.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you're still putting the effort in terms of awareness and looking at personality and things like that. And then, of course, guys. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business guys in this program, where they're kind of looking at like minimum effective dose. Is that something like in terms that you guys looked at with MBA and what you're doing at the University of Kansas now in terms of finding, okay, what can we do that at a minimum amount of effort and time is going to help these guys improve while giving them the opportunity to really focus on basketball?
Yeah, I mean, I think the minimum effective dose idea is super popular. Uh, I think in general, though, in the NBA, you begin to care about the minimum effective dose in season, but out of
Mm,
season, I mean, we don't necessarily want the minimum effective dose. I think for some guys, there's, and generally speaking, a minimum effective dose idea is this idea that here's the minimum amount of work we can do for an effective dose. But sometimes you don't want an effective dose, you want a maximal effective dose. Or you might say, okay, this is where the effect of this dosage would plateau, and any further work would not be worth kind of the return. But that's so subjective because if you got a young player that isn't playing, well, extra volume, even if it means that it's going to only come with a little bit of extra hypertrophy, is probably worth it. Um, so in general, I say in the off season, let's just try to figure out what our outcomes are and train to those things, and then we can figure out how our players are adapting and responding, and we can adjust loads based on individual responses. And then in season, it's like, well, what's the minimum effective dose? What's the minimum amount we can do to still maintain or even improve some of these performance goals? Understanding that basketball performance is the priority here and not necessarily our weight room stuff.
and then is there anything that kind of stood out to you other than that really maybe would be something that we would think is maybe unexpected in terms of how much fatigue it cost, that it would cause, other than like, the sin, okay, we've had 3 games in 4 nights, so guys' legs going to be really tired. Is there anything that you saw in your time that like maybe was like, okay, these guys are really, that's a lot on these guys that we wouldn't maybe normally think, someone who's just watching the game?
Yeah, I mean, not much in the weight room. I mean, soreness, for sure. And sometimes guys will come in the next day and say, "Oh man, Ram, my hamstrings are, killing me today." Um, but most of the load in the NBA comes from playing basketball. And so you track all of that, of course, and you try to understand that. But there was never a time where I felt like we really understand how this is going to affect the guy. Early on in my career, we did have 3 games in 4 nights.
Mm.
They don't have that anymore in the NBA. So that's helped. The NBA has changed some of the way that it actually puts load on players by changing congestion of schedules. Um, but there was nothing that ever really stuck out at a high level. It was kind of like, hey, guys get sore in your weight room sometimes, understand why. Uh, but really, the on court demand is the most.
Hmm. And then how did you end up at the University of Kansas?
Yeah, I ended up here because a scout from the Sacramento Kings knows Coach Self very well, and so he recommended me for the role when it opened up. And long story short, it's changed my career for sure. Been the best decision I've made. Really was hesitant to do it. Turned it down originally because I didn't want to leave the NBA. Originally felt like, well, is that a step down in my career, right? Going from the NBA to college. But after speaking with friends and colleagues and mentors and really thinking about it, um, I kind of looked at it as like, hey, this isn't that risky. If I don't like it, I could probably go back to the NBA at some point. And if I do like it, it might, be a nice chapter in my journey. And so I've certainly loved this chapter that I'm currently in with Kansas, and fortunate to win a national championship in 2022, and so that felt like a full circle moment, a justification of leaving the NBA and coming to college. And now here we are about to, start my 5th season, and preseason ranked #1, which doesn't mean anything, but it certainly, uh, gives us some optimism as we go into the season. Uh, And the goal ultimately is just to get back to April. The teams that play in April are in the Final Four and have a chance to compete for a title, and that's the goal every year.
And in doing research for this episode, I saw again and again on how grueling and rigorous Coach Self's practices are in University of Kansas, and it made me think of this actor. I read a book of his a couple years. I think it was like Joe Manganiello or something like that. But he has this idea in there of like you think you're training at an 8, but you're really training at a 2. And it reminded me of that when I saw all these articles in terms of how uh, hard and Self pushes the players. Can you talk a little bit about what he does to get guys ready for the season in terms of conditioning and just effort and standard required?
Yeah, I mean, coach certainly, coaches are players, as all college coaches though do. I mean, um, if you go watch almost any college basketball team at this time of the season, everyone's going hard. Everybody knows that in, um, 2 weeks, this season's going to kick off, and we better be ready to go. Every game matters in college, and that's the biggest difference between college and the NBA. Is in the NBA, there's no expectation of going undefeated. There's no expectation of, I mean, most teams, a good team can win 60 games. That means they're still going to lose 20. Um, in college, there's an expectation to win every game. It doesn't
Mm.
necessarily mean there's an expectation to go undefeated, but every single time that ball is tipped, there's an expectation that you're going to win. Um, and so I think that the stakes certainly feel higher every game because of that. So yeah, I mean, we definitely go hard, and coach is a Hall of Famer for a reason. He's the best at what he does, and um, honored to be here. Every practice is definitely, challenging as it should be. Um, and so, in general, though, I don't think that's not unique to Kansas. Every college is going to go hard. And if they're not, they're probably not very good because, the old saying of, what was it? Talent fails when it fails to work hard or something like that. It's like that's certainly true, and I'm butchering the quote.
Hmm.
So someone could look it up, but that is definitely true. Every team has talent, but if you're not going to work hard, you're not going to reach the potential there.
And then what are some things the performance staff does to get guys ready in between practices?
But yeah, I mean, we lift every day before practice, and so that's part of the regiment for sure. And but I think it's just leading up to the season, trying to make sure that the guys are ready for practice. And if I get guys ready in from a conditioning perspective to handle the loads of practice, practice usually gets you ready for games. And so that's always how I've looked at it. Is my job is to condition you for practice. Practice will condition you for games. And it seems to be working so far.
And then what are some things that you guys do to improve conditioning?
Yeah, mainly in the off season. So obviously, a big part of our strength and conditioning plan is the conditioning proponent, is the running. You got to run on the court a fair amount. We take our guys outside. We do some fun things in the summer to get out on the hill, and we have a World War II memorial on campus up a giant hill. It's called Campanile Hill. So we'll run the hill on Fridays, get guys outside. Um, but, again, that's probably not very unique or specific to us. That the way that you condition any athlete that's in a running sport is by running them. And so we try to uh, run them and prepare them for what's to come, which is essentially just more running, right? Guys are going to be on their legs a ton during season, and we have to prepare their legs for that demand.
Okay. And then in terms of a personalized approach, how important is it in your experience for athletes to have individualized training and nutrition plans tailored to their specific needs?
Yeah, man, I think it's very important, right? Well, we do it at least, and what I think most strength and conditioning coaches are doing, or at least I hope they're doing, is they're testing their athletes to figure out what are their performance needs, and then they're going to target those with specific training. We understand, the said principle of training, specific adaptation to impose demands, and so it's our goal to impose demands that are very specific to what they need. Now, at one level, they're all playing basketball, so a fair amount of what they need is generalized across a roster. But there's still specific things that each of them need to make them better at their sport. And so, I would say parts of our program translate across the roster, right? as a basketball player, you're going to do jumping, which means you're probably going to do triple extension and flexion, which means we probably can use a trap bar deadlift to load you, right? That's consistent. But one player might need more braking forces versus another player might need more propulsive forces. One player might have a hamstring injury, whereas another player may have had a meniscus surgery before he came here. So you got to understand each of those things as well. So to me, it's like performance needs, previous injury history, understanding symptoms in real time, and trying to attack those as well. And then what are long-term goals, right? Does this player need to gain weight over time? And if so, how much? And then how much can we chip away at that over an off season, right? I got guys that can gain, 10 plus pounds in a summer,
Mm.
and then I got other guys who don't gain any weight in a summer because that's not their goal. So I think it's just understanding all of those things and just making sure you're attacking those every time they work out.
And then is it tough for guys to keep on weight during the season?
No, not necessarily. We do a good job of providing food for them, and they have options for meals. We use the system called a red card here, so they all have basically a credit card that's part of their scholarship that they can go. There's like 20 restaurants in town that they can go to and eat and use that card, um, and then with NIL now, obviously, you know, college athletes are having have extra money that they can also buy their own food. So the food environment now in college basketball has improved, especially at the D1 level. And so, yeah, I think I've never had a problem with guys necessarily holding weight. They'll lose a few once season starts, but after that, they're usually pretty consistent. And we check body weights twice a week, so that helps hold guys accountable as well.
Mm. And then just real quick, I want to go back to on the conditioning. With so much of basketball being lateral and uh, running backwards, does it translate by just focusing on conditioning? But I know you can't do side steps for long distances. You're gonna just the muscles. It's not gonna you're gonna tear up the abductors. But does it translate over by doing direct conditioning of running to basketball? Have you found directly?
Yeah, for sure. We don't do a ton of volume of lateral sliding or backpedaling. Um, we run up and down the court, and that requires change of direction, which will tax some of those systems for you. But yeah, I don't do a ton of backpedaling and those types of things that I know some people have done, and maybe they found success, but I've never seen a problem with let's just run, and for the most part, we'll run in a straight line, and that seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, I'd love to touch a little bit on competitiveness and mindset, where I feel like competitiveness plays a huge kind of it's an undervalued attribute in basketball. Would you say you agree with that? And then could you kind of define what you've seen in your experience in terms of guys who are really competitive and how that translates to performance?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's probably undervalued and underappreciated in low performing teams or low performing players, but players that achieve the most understand it at a very high level. And they understand that oftentimes it's actually a separator. Two guys of the same talent, of the same physical ability, same athletic ability, same basketball IQ. The one that wants to compete every play is going to win out,
Mm,
um, and that's going to show. And we got guys that have proven this over time. You look at a Christian Brown from the Denver Nuggets. I mean, he played in the finals last year, and he's a dog. He competes every play, and that helped us win a national championship. And it also was unsurprising to me when he was able to break out on a global stage with the world watching in the finals when he's going at Jimmy Butler. Like, he competes every play. He doesn't care who's in front of him. Those type of guys typically tend to do well in sport and frankly in life, because I think oftentimes we people confuse competitiveness with maybe being arrogant or being rude or being mean, but to me that's not true at all. When you're in the arena, you need to compete because that to me that's actually a sign of a high quality and a high caliber character.
mm,
You're here to compete. That's what you signed up for, and you're doing what we expect of you. But outside the lines, I mean, CB is a great example. Outside of those four lines on the basketball court, he's a great individual. He communicates, incredibly well. He's respectful, all of those things. And so I think that there's this notion, I think at times that competitiveness is like negative or bad, but it's not. It's in sport, there's an expectation of it. And I think, in fact, it's the other way. If you're not competitiveness, if you don't compete at a high level, if you don't come in with the right mindset, then you're wasting everybody's time, including your own.
I love that. I think that was so good, and I think that can translate beyond basketball, right? Just to attack everything you do. Um, that's so amazing. And in terms of staying in kind of the mindset arena, what have you seen guys kind of struggle with in terms of mindset, and how have you seen them kind of bounce back? Whether that's confidence or, yeah, go there.
Yeah, I think we all deal with it. Whether it's confidence, or whether it's you feel like you're competing and you're not seeing the results,
Mm.
whether they're not coming as fast as you want. I think social media
Life
has
of an
played a role.
entrepreneur, please. I don't know anything about that.
What was that?
I said life of an entrepreneur. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, and so I think because of that, at times we all deal with kind of the doubt and the imposter syndrome and the this isn't working and I don't know what I'm doing. And it's no different than on the court. Guys go hard, but they don't know the play. You went hard, but you went in the wrong direction. And I think importantly, you just can't lose. I think the mindset and the doubt that's going to come with all that goes on in our head, that is not linear, right? That's undulating. There's peaks and valleys, there's pros and cons. There's days where you have really good days, you feel really confident and you feel like you know what you're doing. There's days where you feel like you don't know what the heck's going on. What can't be lost though is the effort. You just have to keep pushing and keep applying. And the image of, I think it's like the cave miner who's mining for like diamonds in the cave, and you got one that turns around and he just had one more hit to go and he was going to get the prize, right? That comes to mind often is, and as coaches, it's what we do. We try to encourage guys to just keep chipping away, chip away, and because you never know when your break's going to come. So, um, I think it's hard, especially on, I work with 18-year-olds. I work with, some of the best high school freshmen will come here and or high school seniors, they become freshmen here and they went from the best player in high school or one of the best players in high school to you might not even play here, because everybody's good. And so, that's hard. Now there's social media that makes it even harder. If you have a bad game, the world can now comment on your post and tell you about it. But there's resources as well, right? There's mindfulness and and wellness are becoming part of the ecosystem that athletes have access to. We certainly have that here. So, and I also think the stigma of mental health is going away at some level. So there's a lot, I think, of positive things in the space that are happening.
Yeah, God bless. That's awesome. And then where do you stand on hydration? Some coaches are obsessed about it in terms of how much it impacts things, and others are, it is what it is. Just make sure you try and drink enough water. Where do you kind of stand in that?
It's fun. I just had a call with a coach the other day, asking about that. And in basketball, it's important. You need to rehydrate, but you can use body weight, at a high level to manage that, right? As long as body weights aren't dropping, and if they are dropping, are they returning? That's probably a good sign of being hydrated. In basketball, we play in an environment that we control as far as the heat, as far as, wind, air conditions running. You're not playing in a heat sensitive environment. So is hydration important? Yes, but is it hard to actually rehydrate in basketball? No, not really. We're not outside in 100-degree weather where it's a little bit different. And for the most part, your body's going to regulate pretty well on, hydration. Now, some guys don't pick up on it or don't drink enough, and but we see that in their body weights, we see that in how they're feeling. So um I think I'm probably on more so towards the middle. I'm not a guy who's running around worried about it. Hey man, make sure y'all drinking water. Got you. Okay, cool, let's move on. And
Mm.
obviously if you got a heavy sweater or something, that's different. But there's products out there for that for sure.
And then where do you see what are you most excited about in your space right now in terms of what's going on with whether it's tech or just like what you're talking about in terms of mindfulness becoming more of a factor? Is there anything that you're really excited about what you're seeing now or what's coming up ahead in the industry?
Yeah, man, I think things that I'm excited about for sure, trying to, I've been doing it for 14 years and still trying to improve the bridge between our understanding of where an athlete is at physically and where he needs to be physically, and then close that gap as fast as we can. So we're doing some fun things with our force plates and how we're monitoring and measuring our guys. We just published a paper. I have a grad student who does a great job. He just published a paper that's open access, um, and that I think highlights some of the stuff that we're trying to look at and do. And then I think the other side of it is just kind of that art of coaching and how to build relationships. And these are things that I've been passionate about for over a decade, and still to this day I think about them. Right, I'm rehabbing a player yesterday, and I'm kind of taking in some of the social cues that I'm getting from him to understand, all right, what will make this guy tick. Um, so those are the two areas that I found myself always excited about and still excited about, is understanding the bridge between that needs analysis, using tech like force plates or other things, right? Velocity based training comes to mind, but then also the art of coaching. It's like both how do we get buy-in for the weight room, but then also how do we get buy-in for life? How are we building these guys up as a character, to go out in the world and do good things and compete at a high level in whatever arena they end up in, right? A lot of guys aren't going to end up in the NBA. I mean, if you look across the board, the the top teams, the top college teams with NBA players, currently, I think Kentucky might have 26, and that's the highest. I think we're somewhere around 12 or 13, but we're top 3 or 4. So it's, and I use that example to show most college players aren't going to the NBA, but they're gonna go on to do something. And can we make sure that wherever they go, they do a good job, they compete in life, and they're good stand-up, citizens and men. And I think that's our goal for sure. So, yeah, it's training, it's life, it's everything.
I love that. And then could you elaborate a little bit more on that, or what some of the things that the staff does to kind of push that forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think here at Kansas, we've never had a player on a 4 year that has been here 4 years not graduate with a degree. We have guys right now getting master's degrees. So I think it's just understanding that. It's understanding you came here to play basketball, sure, but if you're here 4 years, you're gonna get a college degree. If you're here 4, 5, 6 years, you're gonna probably get a master's degree. Along the way, you're gonna make plenty of connections. There's gonna be people that want to hire you. You're gonna leverage the brand of Kansas basketball to your advantage to go out in the world and do good things. So yeah, I think that in general, what we do as a staff is we just try to hold people accountable to all things in life, right? Don't be late. Don't be late to the weight room, because if you're late to the weight room, you might be late to your actual future employer. And then expose them to a lot of education. We do financial literacy things, we do different networking things, and we put them in spaces where they're going to be challenged outside of the basketball court to try to improve on social skills and those things. And so I think that stuff all helps.
That's really inspiring. That's awesome. God bless. Cool. A couple of things I'd like to get your take on in terms of what translates to our program here at Super Athletes. So the biggest program we sell, we call it Super Athlete Training Camp. And the big kind of focal point we have is like, how would you show up if you were an NFL player and you had the Super Bowl on Sunday, and or you're a fighter and you have a world championship fight in 6 weeks? How would you show up every day prepared for that? And because in reality, for most of us, especially people within this program, they have stuff that's really important to them, that it might not be the Super Bowl, but it's their Super Bowl. Could you talk a little bit about your time? I mean, I think Candace is a great example of like kind of the energy that happens with going into the Final Four and just having events like that in our life to kind of gravitate toward and push us to work harder and push ourselves more.
Yeah, I mean, our national championship is probably, the biggest highlight of that. What comes to mind for me is like this idea of perspective, because
Ooh,
like you just said, not everyone's going to play in a Super Bowl. Certainly I won't. But what is your Super Bowl? What are the things that are important to you, and then how do you decide to show up for those? So I think it's more so just like a mindset or an approach. I can't think of like any specific strategies or tactics. I probably would be interested to kind of flip the question, like, what kind of things do you think work very well? We obviously know preparation. Like for us, preparation is easy because it's film, it's practice, but in life, like that's not necessarily the things you're doing, but I guess at some level, that's the analogy. It's like, what is your film? What is your practice? What is your preparation? In entrepreneurship, obviously, for us, it's probably all the little things that we have to do to figure out how to make these things scale and that stuff. But yeah, I probably would almost ask you, like, what do you think comes to mind then?
Yeah, so what we say is dominate your fundamentals. We use the basketball analogy of Phil Jackson teaching Michael Jordan how to throw chest passes when he was 10 years in. And so we say that sleep, movement, hydration, breath, focus, and then on top of that, exactly what you just said in terms of what your individual preparation is for that. Whether what is your film, what is your practice, and then I think if you do those three things, then I think you're in a really good spot. And really quickly as we wrap up here, uh, you have a growing and successful online program for strength and performance coaches. What gravitated you towards starting that, and where do you see that moving forward?
Yeah, essentially, I during COVID, I found myself really thinking a ton about my philosophy, because we just had so much time, and so I actually just went out and started to write what my quote unquote philosophy is, and I ended up with I actually had whiteboards that I went to Home Depot. I got just some sheet whiteboard, cut it and placed it on my garage door. So the inside of my garage was full of whiteboards. A terrible idea because every time my garage opened, they would just Velcro and fall off. So it didn't work well, but I was able to kind of look up and see, well, I filled an entire garage door full of how I think about the training process, and the coaching process. And so then I began to bucket it, and this was really my research hat. I've kind of a background in understanding research. I have a doctorate in human sport performance, and so you begin to put that research hat on. It's like, okay, how do we bucket these things? How do we create an education for? And that wasn't the goal when I did it. It was just kind of like, all right, think of your big rocks. And then I I built units around it. I had 22 units that I thought would be important to understand. You can't sell a 22-week education product. No one's gonna buy that. The first one I kind of beta tested out there for 16 weeks. People loved it. Coaches thought it was the best thing they've ever done. And I felt confident going into it, but I've never done that. So there's kind of two sides of that. And so the reason I felt confident though is because I literally just built the product I wish I had. I built what I wished I had coming up in the games. Like I wish, yes, we all get bachelor's degrees, CSCSs, master's degrees, but that doesn't necessarily teach us how to go out there and do the thing, right? There's the learning and there's the doing. And what my course now hopefully is bridging is that gap between the learning and the doing. And you've seen it, right? You're in it. You've peeked behind the scenes, and hopefully you feel that way. It's yeah, we're going to talk about these things, but let's talk about how to actually do them. How am I actually doing the things? So yeah, it's grown, which has become really cool to see. We've now got, I think, 15 NBA teams have hired our coaches or have our coaches in their programs or in their teams, coaches across all professional sports. Um, so it's just been really cool to kind of see it resonate with coaches because, like everyone else, I have doubt as well and imposter syndrome. And so when you put it out there, you're not sure what the response will be. Again, I felt confident in the content because it's literally what I read and how I'm doing the things, right? And so I stand on like the 14 years of credibility and evidence that it works because I've been doing it. But that's so much different than actually trying to translate it to other people, right? Like that was the hard part. And so to get the responses that we have, the community we're building, um, it is an online education product, but we just did our first annual summit this year, and that was really cool in person to feel the energy that we try to bring on a Zoom call to life. Um, so yeah, that's as you can see, I get excited about it, and where it goes, I have no idea, honestly. The goal is definitely just to try to scale it and help more coaches and physical therapists and athletic trainers around the world. Um, but I wouldn't say there's a big vision for it. It's just to continue to improve it and help people.
Yeah, well, God bless you. You're doing an amazing job, and I think you're really because you found success so young. I think you have such a unique perspective in terms of how like what is important because it's like a I guess the analogy could be like a basketball player who spent 10 years on a losing team and then he comes to a new team like doesn't really understand how to do things potentially. And you never had that, right? And this you never spent 10 years at LA Fitness. You went in and you uh, immediately got the credibility and the authority to start working with the best, and ever like so this is what it is. No extra. This is what works with the best. There's none of that. So God bless, man. Okay, real quick, rapid fire. Biggest mentor in your life?
Chip Schaefer for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. He's still going. Best book you've read in the last year?
Oh, best book. I'm reading the 4 Hour Work Week now, which I really like. So probably
Minimum
that.
effective dose.
Yeah. I went to Bali on vacation recently, and so I enjoyed that experience so much. And so I came home, I bought the 4 Hour Work Week, and I really have enjoyed that for sure. Tim Ferriss is obviously an incredible entrepreneur. He actually started in fitness, which is cool to
Mm,
read and understand as well. So
mhm,
um, yeah, and then I'm looking over here at my bookshelf now. There's a ton up there. I don't nowadays. I don't read a ton
mhm,
of S&C books.
mhm.
Um, because I read so much research that a lot of S&C books are just a repackaging of literature, um, which I kind of do in the course, right? But I'm reading things outside of S&C now about life and coaching that I think translate.
And then biggest habit that you've added, maybe underrated habit you've added to your life in the last year that you feel has really helped your craft or your well-being?
Yeah, for sure. The biggest one, I was just up till 1 a.m. last night organizing things, is basically just trying to organize my brain outside of actually my brain, which and that sounds like this abstract idea. What I mean is the things that go on in our head every day, we have so much that we have to process, so much we learn, so much we think about. If they resonate and they're important with me, I put them down somewhere. So it's basically just high level note taking. Uh, and it's not complicated. I would encourage people just like literally just have note apps in your iPhone and just make sure you're writing down things, and the things that continuously come up, go and do those things, work on those things, whether it's programming, whether it's coaching, whether it's other pursuits in life, whether it's literally your shopping list. Like I think we use technology for so many things, but rarely do we use it to actually get the things out of our brain onto a platform and then go execute those. So that habit has helped a ton because I've been able to do way more in S&C with Kansas, in the course, and in life. It's like it's way easier for me to now go out and accomplish things because I know what I need to do and I can go out and do it.
I love that. Yeah, there's one attribute that has been scientifically proven to correlate with professional success, and it's conscientiousness. And you can break that down into diligence, decision making, uh, perfectionism, which is really just kind of like double check your shit, and
Yeah.
organization. So
Yep.
yeah, it sounds like you're right on that.
Yeah, and I'm a big, I'm not a big morning routine guy. I was just reading on Twitter a moment ago about it.
You're not going to be rich
Literally,
if you don't do a cold plunge in the morning.
exactly. Like I don't do cold plunges because I'm not comfortable in cold, and people say, "Well, you should try things that are uncomfortable." Um, yeah, I mean, I do agree with that, but like you can find them elsewhere.
Yeah,
Um, my morning routine is literally. I'm probably gonna post on Twitter today about it. It's literally like I wake up, I turn the shower on, I take a quick shower to wake up. And then usually what I do is I turn my coffee maker on, I get ready, and then I drink my coffee and I sit down and I figure it out.
yeah,
Or I go work out. Like most days I'll just go and work out. But either way, I got to get my coffee, I drink it, then I go work out. But
yeah,
there's no cold plunge. There's no, meditation is good, and I encourage people to do it.
yeah,
But I don't meditate every morning. I don't journal every morning. I'm not saying those aren't beneficial. I think your morning routine should be the thing that gets you moving and doing as quickly as possible. So yeah.
yeah. I agree 100%. This goes back to this idea of awareness and really just finding what works for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, Dr. Nijem, this has been amazing. Best way for people to reach out to you? I'm guessing it's the IG.
Yep, Instagram for sure. Trying to get on Twitter, be more active on Twitter now, but Instagram DMs, Twitter DMs as well. And then I have a contact form at the bottom of the website, applyperformancecoach.com. There's just an email contact form, so you can, go there as well if you want to drop me an email. So those are the places.
Apply performance coach.
Yep, .com. Yep.
Perfect. Cool. I appreciate your time and expertise, man, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Chase. I appreciate you having me.